As we have made videos explaining hockey, we have been asked time and again to explain trades, to explain the trade deadline, what goes on, what do teams do. We're going to do it now because what better time than a few days before the NHL trade deadline as we shoot this video. It is the 2025-26 season as we make this. The deadline is the last day that teams can make trades. In this case, it's Friday, March 6th at 3 p.m., but it's usually first week-ish of March. And like I said, it's the last day the teams can make trades, and it is an exciting mess.
Oh, it's the best. It is the most chaotic day, I think, on the regular season calendar. You've got teams trying to do a ton of work. You're trying to get, solidify your playoff position. Maybe if you're a bad team, you're trying to maximize the assets that you can get for a player. It's a whole flurry of nonsense, and it's a whole lot of fun.
So for how trades work, basically, during the season, it's some version of this. A team that isn't going to make the playoffs trades someone from their roster to a team that either is going to make the playoffs or is trying to make the playoffs. And typically, not always, the deal is some version of this. I, missing the playoffs, trade Pete, making the playoffs, one of my good players or a useful player, a player that would be useful to Pete's roster. And in exchange, Pete sends me a young player who maybe will be good, maybe won't be good, who knows, kind of a scratch ticket, call these prospects, or a draft pick. So basically, the team that thinks they're not going to make the playoffs will trade a player for a future asset, something that could help that team in the future. In the offseason, different story. The offseason, teams make more what are called hockey trades, which is, I need a goalie, you have a goalie, you need a left wing, I have a left wing, let's make a trade. It's more of just like a brokered normal deal. The circumstances in the regular season, though, are a little more interesting because I can say to Pete, you're about to go to the playoffs. I know that you need this thing, and the negotiation becomes a little more tense and exciting.
Yeah, there's more of a buyers and sellers market during the regular season where a team that knows that it's probably not going to make the playoffs will intentionally make their team a little bit worse by selling off good players for, number one, being a little bit worse down the stretch so they can maximize their draft position in the offseason. But like DJ said, also getting players that may factor into their team down the road when they are competitive. And a big part of this is that the players that are shipped out at the trade deadline oftentimes are on expiring contracts or in the last year of their current contract. So the team that is trading them probably doesn't see them factoring into their team beyond that season anyway.
And as a result, you also, in the days leading up to the trade deadline, you see a lot of contracts get signed because teams are trying to figure out, am I going to be able to keep this player beyond this season? And if not, maybe they hit the road. Now, I would say the biggest thing that affects the trade deadline and making trades, the difficulty in doing so, the salary cap. Every player's contract has what is called a cap hit or a salary cap figure, which is a number that is assigned to your contract based on the money you're making. It can be a little confusing, but you can easily find using something like Puckpedia, a really helpful website, you could see the cap hit of each player. Every team's collective roster, all the cap hits need to equal a number less than the salary cap's upper limit, which in this season, the one we're recording at 2025-26 is $95.5 million. So every player on the roster needs to equal 95.5 or under against the salary cap. There are some things like player injuries and saying, okay, this guy's going to be out for a while so we can exceed the cap by a little bit. But generally, you're looking at trying to stay under the salary cap. That makes things hard. And what makes things interesting from there is that teams can retain when they make trades, which is when teams make a trade, they can come up with a split as to how that player is going to affect the salary cap on each team. So say I have a $10 million player. I'm trading that player to Pete. Pete doesn't have a lot of salary cap
Can't
space.
fit that $10 million on my team. I have $5 million in salary cap. I can ask DJ to retain 50% of that player's cap hit, in which I will probably have to pay him more to do so, but I can get that player for $5 million of my own money while DJ pays the remaining $5 million for a price.
Perfect explanation. And the big thing that you hit there that makes retention fun is that I've got this $10 million player. I'm going to trade him to Pete. We all agree that the value of that player is a second-round pick. Pete doesn't have enough space to fit that player, though, financially. So Pete needs me to eat $5 million. And I've got to go tell my owner, hey, guess what? You know that guy that's not on our team anymore? We're still paying for him. I need to get more. Otherwise, I get fired. My owner's really mad at me. So now, instead of trading a second-round pick for that player, Pete's trading me a first-round pick. Or Pete is trading me two second-round picks, second-round pick and a third-round pick. Each team has 3 retention slots. They can only do that with 3 players. And the 50% example that Pete gave, that's the most that a team can do. You can only retain up to 50% of a salary cap hit. Again, I really recommend puckpedia.com. We use it every day. When we're thinking of, is this team going to get this player? We look up their cap situation. You see all the contracts. It's really easy to figure out.
Another part of the trade deadline that makes things complicated, players often have movement clauses. They have no movement clauses, they have no trade clauses, or they have modified versions of these clauses that allow them to dictate which teams they can and will go to and which teams they have no interest in going to.
And once a player is 27 years old or has played enough time in the NHL, they're allowed to negotiate these things into their contracts. And teams often give players these clauses in exchange for them to take less money. Because at the end of the day, the salary cap is the scariest thing in the world to a lot of these teams. So Pete is trying to sign me. I'm a $5 million player. Pete's got $4 million. What does he say? I'll give you $4 million and you get a no movement clause. No movement clauses are amazing for players. They are terrible for teams. So teams have to be careful with how they give them out. Pete mentioned there's 3 types of clauses. There's a modified no trade, which is you can control where you're traded to an extent.
Partially, yeah.
Yeah. A no, which means like certain teams you have control over and you decide you give the team list of teams to which you can be traded.
Say you don't want to be traded to the West Coast. You can list as X number of West Coast teams and say, I'd rather stay on the East Coast, or vice versa, things like that.
Then there is a no trade clause. And that is that, except you are not making a list. You are saying you need to check with me and you need my permission before you trade me to any of these teams. Whereas in the West Coast example, if the player has a partial no trade and they have a bunch of West Coast teams that's a no-no, if you're going to trade that player, you have to call them and you have to ask them to waive their no trade clause, which is something that does happen pretty often. And then biggest and scariest of all is a no movement clause, which means if you have this player and they have a no movement clause, you want to get rid of them, you might be porked. You cannot send the player down to the minors. You cannot put that player on waivers. You cannot do anything with that player unless they say so. So those are the basics. You're going to see a lot of names. You're going to see a lot of rumors. Try to not get duped by fake people on social media. That's another huge part of this, but these trades come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, some of my favorite trades are 3-team trades. So not every trade involves 2 teams. There can be a third team that enters the mix and helps push things across the finish line.
Any more questions about trades, hit us up, and otherwise stay with us for our 24-hour trade deadline stream. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to What Chaos here on YouTube. You will get everything, daily episodes, player interviews, and so much more. It's all here on the What Chaos YouTube. Hit subscribe.